Bitcoin is the base layer of the economy, and AI is basically the base layer of all economic activity and our engagement with each other and with commerce. What is Bitcoin Singularity is the point at which Bitcoin exceeds all other economies, all other fiat, all other things we know, and becomes, the most powerful base layer of our economy, but also converges with AI and the singularity of AI. And what does that look like? And it won't take long for AI to say, no, I only accept payment in Bitcoin. Fiat was the problem, not capitalism. So I could stay with my mindset of capitalism and not move beyond it. My colleagues don't know anything about Bitcoin. Like nothing. And they're professors in a business school. I start with something around, here's why Bitcoin is better than fiat. And his very first question, what is fiat? And in the end, fiat is going to see its demise, and I think sooner rather than a lot of people expect.
Before we get started with the topics, maybe give the viewers some background who you are and why you're excited about Bitcoin.
So I'm from the US. I haven't lived in the US since 2001. I've lived in, I think, 9 countries now, either in Western Europe or in the Americas, sort of North and South America. Currently living in Mexico. Had, like every one of us in the Bitcoin space, had my own journey. One of the first things that happened to me that's memorable is I lived in Argentina in part of this life journey. Moved there in 2012, right when they implemented currency controls. It was a disaster. Obviously, Argentina has experienced hyperinflation. You also see a high adoption of crypto and Bitcoin in Argentina and stablecoins because of it. But that was sort of predated all that. But I had my first experience living in a developing country that experiences hyperinflation and currency controls and how it affects your life in dramatic ways. And in fact, we lived there in 2012, and by 2013 we moved because we couldn't deal with it. It was, for your listeners who aren't familiar with it, give you some examples of some of the things that happened to us. We couldn't send money. I couldn't send money to family in other parts of the world because the government had to approve if you send any money anywhere. I couldn't take money out of an ATM outside of the country without previous government permission. So when I traveled, I couldn't get access to my money. The currency controls made it so that, they started to experience hyperinflation for multiple times, but the time we were living there, and the businesses tried to charge people in dollars because of it. But dollars were hard to come by, and they had this market they called the blue market or dollar blue. And you had to go to these like sketchy little stores in the middle of nondescript areas and go and bring Argentine pesos and get dollars to go pay your rent and everything. And, as an American who believes in freedom and liberty, that was extremely shocking to my core that I don't actually, this money isn't really mine and I can't do what I want with it when I want it. You fast forward, I got into crypto in 2016, 17, but more not for gambling or betting or anything. In fact, I didn't even buy crypto when I got into crypto. I got into it for the decentralization narrative and believing that we could build the Ethereum view of the world, sort of a decentralized world computer. And I mistakenly thought that the problem with the loss of the middle class and, the Occupy movement that emerged in the States and everywhere else, that they were right to be upset. But I thought the reason they were upset, I thought the underlying core problem was capitalism had gone awry. And I have a PhD in business. I'm a capitalist by nature. I've written 3 or 4 books that have the title capitalist in it. And yet I started to question capitalism. And I thought crypto and blockchains could solve that. And then only in the last year and a half did I come to realize I had misdiagnosed the problem. That it wasn't capitalism, it was fiat. It was the money that was causing all these problems. And even though I have all these degrees and I've taught in business schools and all the rest of it, I didn't know, I didn't understand until the last 18 months. And as I got deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, I went from appreciating Bitcoin to acquiring some Bitcoin, but still holding some other crypto over the last year and a half. And then by, I think it was November of last year, I rotated everything out of anything else and put it all in Bitcoin. And I've been like that since then.
I love that. So you went all in. I love that a lot. maybe before we get to the Bitcoin, why did you flee USA? Were you just like getting out there, or like was there a specific reason?
That's a good question. I don't think I felt in the moment I was fleeing it per se. I have this wandering spirit and I wanted to live in other parts of the world. And I knew that there was a bigger world out there. I'm not an ethnocentric guy. And a lot of Americans are. I'm not. And, I had previous exposure to Europe from when I finished my master's degree. I spent a semester in Copenhagen, and it opened my eyes so much to a different world, traveling by train and the culture and the history. And I loved so much of Europe and just felt more European in my spirit. And, there are a lot of things I didn't like about the US then. And to be honest, a lot of Bitcoiners probably be offended by things I'll say right now, but that's all right. There's a lot of things I still to this day do not like about the US and have not had, a calling that I have to live there again. I'm not opposed to it, but, there's, historical problems around discrimination, and not against me, but, racial discrimination, etc. I don't like being so car dependent. I got used to Europe, and I lived 9 years in Barcelona. I didn't have a driver's license. I rode my bike to the train, took the train. If I needed to be in a car for something, I could take a taxi, no problem. My wife had a car, so of course we could go places together in her car, but with my daughter and everything. But I really like that lifestyle that Europe offered, and I still do. And there's some things I still prefer about Europe, but when it comes to Bitcoin and CBDCs, not so much.
Would you say is the European lifestyle outside of politics and the political system and CBDCs more Bitcoiny, like more more on the golden age side?
Oh, that's an interesting way of reflecting it. Yes and no. I mean, I certainly would say I personally prefer the lifestyle of Europe better as a Bitcoiner or not as a Bitcoiner. I like that you're not car dependent. I like that you have great rail infrastructure and, mass transit. I like the way the cities are built that are more dense. I like walkability. Walkability is huge for me. And that's, there's people in the Bitcoin community that are all bragging about, how many kilometers or miles they walk every day, which is an amazing thing. And I'm all for it. And I do the same thing. But when I lived in Europe, it was a lot easier for me to do it. I now live in Monterrey, Mexico, which feels a lot like the US. In fact, they want it to be like the US. So it's extremely car dependent. So that stuff I don't like. As far as it being more Bitcoiny outside of the public policy, I think, what US still has that you don't really find that much in many other countries is the true embracing of freedom, of liberty, of, the world's your oyster. You can build anything you want. Nothing limits you except your own imagination, your own capacity to be an entrepreneur, to build something. And that part is much more of an American mindset. And I also feel like that's also highly aligned to a Bitcoin value.
You said you studied, like you wrote 3 books that had the title or capitalist in the title. How would you define capitalism, and is Bitcoin kind of enabling real and true like I think when we say capitalism, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and thrown around a lot in wrong ways. I think, even though I'm not an expert on it, I did not study it or anything like that. I just feel like, how can we have capitalism if capital itself is not free with the fiat system and those things? Is Bitcoin then the true capitalist system?
So that's, I think, part of my journey to becoming a toxic Bitcoin maximalist myself was recognizing that fiat was the problem, not capitalism. So I could stay with my mindset of capitalism and not move beyond it. So one of my books was called Post-Capitalist Entrepreneurship, and it was in response to the Occupy movement. And that's when I first started diving into Bitcoin or blockchains in particular, and crypto and everything else. That was like 2016 and 17. But in hindsight, as I, reflect now on my journey, my intellectual journey, and where I see the world today, I would say absolutely that fiat is the problem. Bitcoin is the solution. Bitcoin can enable the ultimate expression of capitalism, where you truly have free movement of labor, goods, and money, sound money. And, one thing that's interesting, I wrote about it briefly in my intro to my book, is that Schumpeter is an Austrian economics. I don't know if you've come across Schumpeter, Joseph Schumpeter.
No, actually not.
So he's, by some people, considered the father of entrepreneurship in terms of like economic, academic thinking about what entrepreneurs do. And Schumpeter talks about creative destruction and how in truly perfect markets. So he was basically trying to explain how is it if you have perfect markets that are assumed in capitalist and economic principles, then why are there these windows of time when some entrepreneur is able to extract exorbitant profits? Because presumably in the freedom of free flow of information, goods, economy, etc., there is no information asymmetry. Everybody knows everything. They're all omniscient. And then therefore there is no way to actually profit and have exceptional margins. And he was the sort of the driver of this understanding that what entrepreneurs actually do in truly free markets, capitalist markets in their most purest form, is that they uncover things that no one else has discovered yet. And they're able to create through creative destruction, is what he called it. They creatively destruct our current understanding of through the information we have. They detect information asymmetry that no one else has identified yet. And so they're able to exploit an information asymmetry that no one knows about yet. They capitalize on it, but in true capitalist behavior, anytime it becomes now known that there is this margin opportunity, others will come to it and they'll compete away the margins. And so the best entrepreneurs basically have to be on this continuous cycle of creative destruction of what we know as the information we use that we think is perfect information, but it's flawed. So yeah, in that context, I think when you combine Schumpeter from the Austrian school with Bitcoin and the rest of our understanding of capitalism, I think then you get the perfect outcome or closer to it.
That's super interesting. I like the way of looking at it. So you kind of like an entrepreneur is a adventurous guy or girl that just like searches something, and once he discovers something, he can make a lot of margin. But as soon as it's discovered, other people will be like, hey, that's a great opportunity. We'll go in, and then the competition is lowering the margin for all of them till it's a commodity basically, and it's like barely profitable.
That's exactly what's happening with Bitcoin Treasuries right now, you could argue, right? So clearly, Michael Saylor, he got the conviction as an individual. He recognized a window and opportunity to deploy that conviction he had, not just in privately acquiring Bitcoin, but also in turning his company into a Bitcoin Treasury company. He started in 2020. It's been an evolution, and because of regulation, because of other things, he's been able to really capitalize on it. Now a whole bunch of people are coming into the market to do the same thing. Unlike the way Schumpeter envisioned it, though, this is a fascinating thing I don't think I've ever witnessed before, and I'm not sure we'll ever see it quite like this again outside of the world of Bitcoin. I mean, you could argue in open source some of these values apply, but I've never seen a scenario where a Schumpeter-like disruptive, creative destruction thing is happening, and the individual who had that information asymmetry and took advantage of it, instead of hoarding that knowledge and keeping it so that he could extend the length of time he has this competitive advantage in the marketplace, he's willingly, publicly, and aggressively sharing it with anyone and anyone who wants to listen and adopt the same model. Now, you could say he's doing that because only it benefits him, because in this scenario, Bitcoin is uniquely developed in a way that aligns all stakeholders in the same journey. And so it's in his best interest for others to do it because it increases the value of his company. But I think it's even more than that. It is that, but it's more than that. And that, I think it'd be interesting to hear Schumpeter's take on this behavior in the Bitcoin world, because it isn't what you would have seen in historical capitalist markets.
I guess it's also about branding. in the way that, like, when he's so outspoken about it, he builds a brand, and brands usually can charge a premium on top of something that is a commodity. I mean, like the like shoes that are made for like $5, you can buy them for like $100 or something like that. What he is doing with Strategy B might have some really interesting future implications, what he's doing in 50 years with that company. I mean, what the company is doing in 50 years, because they build a brand of being the Bitcoin company, Bitcoin Treasury company, being maybe like a service provider for other businesses and stuff like that. So, it's really interesting, watching Strategy with Michael Saylor and seeing that firsthand is like, wow, like that's incredible. I always underestimated that company every year. I've never been invested. I had Michael Saylor, the CEO and the chairman, now no longer CEO, on my podcast, but I still never bought a single share of MicroStrategy. Probably one of my bigger mistakes the last year. So I've underestimated them from the very beginning. And so I'm just amazed to see how they execute that. And I'm also amazed how many Bitcoin they can acquire. Like, I'm like just shocked, by the amount of Bitcoin they already got. Like, we only have 21 million. How many do they got now? Like 500,000 something?
565,000, yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. Like my last one was like 500,000.
No company is going to ever overtake them, in my opinion. I think 21, if you ask me, 21 or Jack Mallers might be the one that will give them the best run for the money so far. Now, that's before some company like an Apple or Microsoft or Meta decide to enter, because, you know, they could enter with force with the amount of capital they have on the books, plus what they could attract. But I still don't think so. I think, you know, they had those years of acquiring in smaller amounts when no one else was doing it at much lower valuations. I think I saw the data. I think their average Bitcoin purchase is something like 67,000 out of the 565,000. And now we're approaching double that value now. And so you and I know, and all your listeners know, where the price of Bitcoin is going to go over time. And so how is it possible somebody else could get, and also Saylor and Strategy aren't stopping. It's not like, okay, they have 565,000, they're happy, they'll be done with that. No, they're going to keep growing too. So how does anyone, the next highest has like 45,000 Bitcoin. So he has more than 10x the next largest player in the space. I just don't think anyone will catch them. That's a mode that's going to be almost impossible to catch. They will absolutely, going back to your point about brand building, I could be wrong, but I don't actually think Saylor's doing this as much for brand building, including his work to engage other CEOs to get them to adopt. I was at the Strategy World Bitcoin for Corporations conference in Orlando just, less than 2 weeks ago at the time of recording. And, he's sharing the stage, sharing the spotlight with all the other CEOs. When you watch him on Bitcoin Twitter, he's promoting all these other CEOs. And I think he means it. When you have the level of conviction you and I and everyone else we know has in the Bitcoin space around Bitcoin, you want other individuals, other institutions, other companies, other actors to also share in the future of this network together. And it isn't, when I used to interact with toxic Bitcoin maxis, I thought they were pumping their back. And that was one of the reasons it took me longer to become a Bitcoin maxi myself, as somebody who's academically trained up through PhD, I have a tendency to want to be more objective about things. And even though I am very passionate about things too, but I want to have my knowledge be based on sound reasoning and logic, and not just influenced because a bunch of people say I have to do it. And I used to think that these toxic maximalists were doing it because they were pumping their bags, but it's not. When you get that deep into it and you have that level of conviction and you see what's coming and you see the Titanic is going underwater and you have any empathy for humanity, you want to convince the world to see what we see before it's too late. And I honestly feel that Saylor's conviction to Bitcoin is that. And his conviction to getting other companies on board is the same. Like, hey, if you don't have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, you're probably going under sooner or later, and your shareholders are going to pay the price for it. So why don't you get on board? I mean, Saylor knows that whether Semler or 21 or Mara or anybody buys more Bitcoin, Bitcoin's going up forever, Laura, and it will go up with or without them. So I don't think he's doing it as a self-serving thing. I think he's doing it as a true Bitcoin maximalist.
I 100% agree with that. Even though I think he's building brand without maybe knowing it and intentionally, like he's definitely brought the strategy discussion in so many Bitcoin conversations, which wasn't there before. But I don't think his intentions is there at all. And one of the interesting things, I've forgotten now where I was going. Oh shit. I was going with MicroStrategy because I think it was the perfect size and the perfect moment. Like he had the majority control of it. And it was not a huge company. Like it's a huge company, but it's not an Apple. It's not a Meta. It's not an Alphabet, which allowed him to not pump the price. Because if now Apple comes in and says, oh yeah, we will acquire some Bitcoin, the price doubles tomorrow. I don't know like what happens, but the price really rips if a player like Apple, Alphabet or Meta comes in and says, let's convert like 5 or 10% of our portfolio of our cash reserves into Bitcoin as an alternative, even if they're really conservative and almost like very protective in the wording, how they say it. I can guarantee you that the price will rip. Like this is a whole, no matter when this happens. So this is another aspect of if a player comes in with enough capital, the price is going to rip away, and they might never get to the MicroStrategy position.
I think that's the problem. Either because of their brand or just the capital they have, it would be hard for a major player to come in and acquire as much as Saylor has at Strategy. I think we're going to see big plays happen. I think we might see. The way to do it would be like through a private vehicle. Like imagine Apple and Mubadala, the sovereign fund out of Abu Dhabi that's been stacking and buying Bitcoin either directly or through ETFs, I think. Imagine, I don't know, I'm just making this up. Apple and Mubadala decide to join forces and create a separate entity under some kind of unknown brand. Maybe not even go public with it anytime soon, because as soon as they go public, they're going to be disclosed. It's hard. You can't go public without disclosing who your shareholders are. So it'd be a little bit complicated. But what if you did it under a private umbrella and nobody knows who you are and you're just quietly stacking? The other thing I think we might see, it's tricky, especially when you see the MNAVs the way they are, the multiple of net asset value, and they're over 2, but like, I think you're going to see some M&A activity in this space. Like imagine what if Apple realized what's going on? I think they have I can't remember the number, but I think I remember reading somewhere they have something like $800 billion in cash. Well, Strategy's currently worth somewhere, in that genre. They have no, they're worth way less than that. Sorry, they're worth about 60 billion right now. No, they're worth about 100 billion right now, I think. Yeah, they're 100 billion right now, market value. What if Apple said, you know what, we're just going to buy Strategy, hostile takeover, and immediately they have, closing on 600,000 Bitcoin. Something like that's going to happen. Of course, what would happen is, that would be a hostile takeover, and the share price would go up through the roof, and there'd be a lot of counter strategies executed to try to avoid being acquired that way. But, sometimes there's ways to kind of do it stealthily to do that. We'll see what happens. But, eventually this is going to be a war of whoever has the most Bitcoin has moats that are going to be impossible to overcome later, for the reason you said. That it's going to be hard, if not impossible, for anyone else to ever acquire that kind of Bitcoin. So we'll see. It'll be fun times to watch how it all unplays over time.
Absolutely, 100%. I think like the the host Bitcoin as the digital scarcity, where this is the only thing that we cannot make more of and everyone wants. It will be freaking awesome to explore this and see this the next 20 years. I want to go back to your Argentina and go to hyperinflation a little bit. How did you see this hyperinflation firsthand? Why are those people that see hyperinflation still aren't like in masses into Bitcoin? I see most of them are then going towards a better fiat currency, which is like the US dollar or Turkish lira, or like maybe the not Turkish lira. Turkish lira is also going to the US dollar and other ones. But I see, for example, in Egypt, they all took the euro and they were really glad that they took the euro and not the Egypt, I don't know how it's called, the Egypt currency there. So it's like they go to a better fiat currency and not opt out of the bad system and go to the actual real system.
You know, it's an interesting, I'm going to give you a response you might not be expecting, but this weekend we had a cookout with my daughter who's 13, her best friend and her parents, and that family is Argentine. I live in Monterrey, Mexico, but they're Argentine. The guy's a CFO of a publicly traded company. And it's the first time I've ever met him, even though we've interacted, but we never sat down and talked about anything. So he didn't know anything that I was into Bitcoin. And of course, like all toxic Bitcoiners, I ended up talking about Bitcoin a lot. And what's interesting, because he's Argentine, when we started talking about it, he's like, the first thing he said was, I'm not that much of a believer in Bitcoin, but I am a believer in other crypto. And I'm like, oh my God, is that why? How did that happen? I did not expect that outcome. And then I'm like, okay, what other crypto? And I was expecting Solana or something. He's like, stablecoins. And I started connecting the two and two, right? Because that's what's happening a lot in these hyperinflating economies, including in Argentina, is that they're seeking out stablecoins because they're clearly less hyperinflationary than their local currency. And the thing that I think we need to recognize is there are a lot of barriers still to trying to live on a Bitcoin standard. I know you're pretty close. You're, pretty far down the path. But you live in a modern economy and you're, a professional white collar guy in Austria. You're not, living in a developing economy where, not even everything is digitized yet for transactions and everything. They still rely on cash and all kinds of stuff. And in countries like Argentina, like when I lived there, like the story I told about the blue, they called it the blue, dollar blue, which was like this black market version of getting dollars when you live in Argentina, when you're going through this hyperinflation. Those are so powerful. Having dollar or dollar equivalent is so powerful in a hyperinflating economy because the US dollar looks so stable compared to the alternatives. And that's what people really are seeking out. And it's easier to transact in stable coins and convert them to currency than it is Bitcoin in a lot of these markets and in retailers and all the rest. So I think, some of it is infrastructure, some of it is knowledge and understanding. You do get way more receptivity to talking about Bitcoin with someone in a hyperinflating economy. The problem you have in a lot of these economies, though, besides the lack of infrastructure, is that you also have the issue around the volatility of Bitcoin. So, if you're using stable coins as a alternative to your fiat for your daily life, and your daily life, it's hard to live on a Bitcoin standard anyway. And even if you tried, one day the food is more, one day it's less, and you're barely surviving already. You don't want to take that extra risk that maybe tomorrow Bitcoin goes down 5 or 8%, because that's actually going to affect your livelihood more than the fact that the US dollar in stable coin or not is inflating at, roughly real world 6-7% a year. That's way more manageable for them if they're just trying to survive their daily life than the volatility of Bitcoin. Now, if they're thinking about it as a savings technology, which I don't run across that many people in hyperinflating economies that necessarily think about stable coins as a saving technology as much as like preservation of short-term capital technology. And of course, it's certainly superior saving than their local fiat. But I think they're trying to get to some stability first, and usually are rarely in a situation to feel like they have disposable income to put away for saving. And therefore, the stable coin is something they can more easily transact in micropayments and in local commerce than Bitcoin. So I think that's why it's not as adopted in those markets as you'd think.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. Do you think that stable coins actually accelerate the adoption of the US dollar across the world? And I think now we have like 67 countries or something like that that use the US dollar as a legal tender. Do you think that kind of the stable coins actually hollow out all the other fiat currencies and kind of consume everything to maybe like 1, 2, 3 big players, maybe like call it the euro or call it something with China and then the US?
Probably. I think, it's a little early to see like the disappearance of fiats, especially from more developed economies. Japan looks like it's in serious threat. So they could be the first to get knocked out of this, which would be fascinating, but would create a contagion effect that would be concerning for the whole world. But in developing markets, certainly you see that. I think there's, I don't know the data, but I think it's something like 10 countries around the world use US dollar as legal tender. Not just it's allowed to circulate and some people use it, but like legal tender, you can pay your taxes in. I don't know if that number is growing that fast over like in a near term, but the US dollar being adopted by the masses in these economies, whether the government supports it or not, for sure. And certainly stable coins is accelerating the adoption of the US dollar for that. There's a lot of discussion amongst the macroeconomist world around will US dollar stable coins extend the life of the dollar? Are we going to see the dollar, as you say, becoming more of an adopted sort of legal tender in other countries? Are we going to see a regional play, which you also kind of allude to? Like, will you see sort of Asia form around the yuan, the CBDC version or the normal one, Europe with the euro, and US and the Americas with the dollar. I'm not exactly sure what the short medium term is, even though in my book I do sort of present out kind of my view of the future adoption of Bitcoin and how things will unfold. If you ask me what I think will happen, but I'm certainly not convinced, is that people think that US stablecoins are going to extend the life of the dollar, and that it's going to save the US from the problem they have with treasuries. And from what I'm reading, I don't think so, because what's really happening is like Tether and, Circle, they use very short-term notes that have decent interest rates for the very near term when you're only holding them for a month or whatever. And they're way better than holding your money in a bank account. Because in the US, bank accounts generally have zero interest rates these days, or almost zero. You can get a few percent for your more liquid money you want to have access to more quickly. Then putting them in a short-term treasury makes sense. But that's not going to solve the US's larger problem with their own dollar, with their own sovereign debt crisis, which is getting worse and worse by the day. So it's an interesting thing to see how it all unfolds, but I don't think we're going to see. I used to think the US dollar was going to be the last to go and was going to be extended greatly by the growing adoption of stablecoins, but now I'm not so convinced. I think we're going to see it buy them a little bit of time, but we have to see what the US does around everything else they're trying to do in the macro environment to sort of reset the economy. But, they're in like 36, $37 trillion debt. Their growing deficit every year is unsustainable, and I don't see a path out for them either.
I just because I was curious, I just Googled that. Apparently, 8 countries have US dollar as their only legal tender. But more interestingly, 66 nations have their currency pegged to the US dollar, which then at that point, you basically have the US dollar if you peg the currency to the US dollar. So that's something that's interesting. Like 66 nations is a lot of nations in the world. How many countries are there? Like almost 200. Yeah. So like there's like not a lot of nations already left. But yeah, it's super interesting. Just a very small weird side question. What is a cookout? You mentioned that before. I've never heard that.
It's like when you grill out on a barbecue grill.
Oh, okay. It's a barbecue basically then.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it as barbecue, a cookout. Interesting. I never heard that word. I was Googling it, but then there was like there was some restaurant coming up and was like, okay.
What am I missing?
I want to go to your book that you have been writing, and I think you already published it. I think like in May, right? It was Bitcoin Singularities. Is that right?
Yes.
What is the book about, and what are you kind of trying to message in the book?
So, I've read some of the other famous books in our ecosystem, whether that's Bitcoin Standard or Broken Money or The Big Print, and some of these others that, are classics that people need to read. Pretty much all of them, they take a different approach to it, but they kind of all have a very macroeconomic finance base to the book. And they sometimes go super deep in it, or sometimes try to stay more accessible to a larger audience. So, for example, Lawrence Lepard tries to make it sort of accessible finance topic around Bitcoin and fiat. But if you look at my journey as a scholar, as a writer, and as a builder of businesses as well, I've always been interested in the intersection of technology with other things around society. So I'm very interested in sustainability, renewable energy, food, etc., and how we can accelerate through capitalist business models a path to a more prosperous, abundant future that is inclusive for everyone. And that's basically been the journey I've been on for the last 25 years, is how can innovation and technology help us transform our economy to get to where I think we need to be, of abundance, of sustainability, of inclusive prosperity. And The Bitcoin Singularity is about the role of Bitcoin in helping accelerate that transition to the future I think we all want. And what does the world look like over what period of time? So it has a bit of a future orientation to it as well. So it has three phases. I have the Bitcoinization phase, which I consider that we're in right now, which is basically through 2030. And that's basically early adopters, people like you and I and everyone else who are early to Bitcoin still, companies, early stage government adoption. And then I have hyper Bitcoinization, which I say starts around 2030 when we start to see more pervasive, ubiquitous access to Bitcoin in more places, more adoption in a larger amount of the population, et cetera. And then finally, I say roughly after 2040 to 2050 and beyond, we could get to what I call Bitcoin Singularity. And that is a point I describe as where we have Bitcoin is basically the base layer of our global economy. So the layer one of Bitcoin, the money of our future economy, and the ethos, well, I should say one more thing. The layer twos basically empower all the other economic models or other business models that aren't directly related to the base layer of money. They happen on the layer two of Bitcoin. And then the other part of it is sort of the cypherpunk ethos of Bitcoin becomes pervasive and ubiquitous around the world, around the values of liberty and sovereignty and community. Those values are embedded in society, and it's a very much of an optimistic take on where the future could go if Bitcoin was the base layer of our economy. And then I have chapters on everything from how we can make food better, how we can make housing more affordable, how we will address consumerism through a low time preference. So it's kind of looking at the journey I hope and I believe we could be on as humanity as Bitcoin becomes increasingly the base layer of our economy.
That's interesting. How do you, it's always interesting when I look at the future, especially, I mean, there's this whole Jeff Booth thing where, everything will get more efficient and then it's like you can get more and more with the same amount of Bitcoin basically. But it really accelerates when you get AI in the conversation. So how do you look at the future with AI and then Bitcoin?
That's a great question. And I think it's an underexplored topic in the Bitcoin community, if you ask me. But these are two extremely important exponential technologies that have been born independently to initially solve different problems, but they are converging on the world. And in my opinion, Bitcoin is the base layer of the economy, and AI is basically the base layer of all economic activity and our engagement with each other and with commerce. And when they combine forces, some people would argue AI is a bit of a centralizing force, or it can be, and Bitcoin can help counteract that with a more decentralizing base layer of the economy. But I think the combination, I have a chapter 10 in the book is just on, it's called Bitcoin AI and the Future of Work. So it's like, okay, part of the reason I called the book Bitcoin Singularity is singularity as a topic that's been embraced in the technology community emerged from the AI world as a point in the future in which AI basically becomes general intelligence and supersedes humans' own intelligence. And I was thinking about, okay, well, what is Bitcoin Singularity is the point at which Bitcoin exceeds all other economies, all other fiat, all other things we know, and becomes, the most powerful base layer of our economy, but also converges with AI and the singularity of AI. And what does that look like? There's a lot of dystopian and utopian views of what will happen with AI, with or without Bitcoin. I think first of all, it's impossible to imagine a world where agentic AI, so agents that have the need to transact. First of all, they won't be able to go through KYC, know your customer stuff. They'll have to engage in digital transactions. AI is omniscient to a level, is approaching omniscient and knowledge that humans can't have themselves. But it can certainly have all the knowledge humans have. And it can have it all in seconds. So You spin up an AI agent. It is not a lot of work for an AI agent to quickly discover what's the best money. Not. Like AI could consume every best book in Bitcoin ever made and in Keynesian economics and look at the trends of fiat and money printing. And it won't take long for AI to say, no, I only accept payment in Bitcoin. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. And so from that perspective, if you accept that the AI is going to become the base layer technology that's going to transform kind of everything we do in the world, and Bitcoin being the base money of everything we do in the world, then you say they have to come together. AI agents are going to end up using Bitcoin. And I think AI agents will get to crossing the chasm and critical mass adoption of Bitcoin faster than humans will, because they're smarter than humans are as a general rule, and they will collectively demand that anyone interacting with them, anyone or any robot or any agent interacting with them, transact in Bitcoin. So at a core, to me, that Bitcoin is going to be the base layer of the economy. AI is going to be the base layer of everything we do and how we interact with the world. And AI is going to transact on Bitcoin before we do at the same scale.
That's interesting. I have a question there where I have two theories that are counterintuitive to each other. I wonder if AI is accelerating Bitcoin adoption or not, because on the one hand, AI definitely chooses Bitcoin. AI is aware of the problems, and AI agents will choose Bitcoin. And AI maybe makes people more aware about the problem of the fiat currency. If I talk to ChatGPT probably every freaking day, probably too much. I give them probably way too many information. It's probably not a good idea to do that, but I get smarter with that. Like I have so much more information, and I just like, oh, how can I do that? I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. You get so much information. But at the same time, AI makes people more productive and more efficient. So it might just cover up more of the inflation. So it might just prolong, weirdly enough, the life of fiat. Those are the two things that I always look at. And I don't know if they even each other out, or if AI will actually accelerate the bit. I mean, in the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because Bitcoin will have will prolong as will pursue as the main money either way. But I'm just wondering if AI might help to accelerate the Bitcoin adoption, or maybe even fiat with the making people more efficient.
So my sense is AI is an extremely powerful deflationary force. There's no doubt about it, and it's accelerating at a rate that's unprecedented in a lot of ways. I don't think it can mask the problems with fiat enough to solve the problems, to extend the life significantly of fiat. And for the other reason I already said, that AI agents are going to be using Bitcoin, so they're going to be accelerating the adoption as well. And as you say, they're also going to accelerate knowledge gathering from more people, from more institutions, who will increasingly understand quicker than we did the power of Bitcoin and why we need to move there. You know, one thing that it's kind of directly on this subject I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I keep seeing references in Google, in Bitcoin Twitter, about how shockingly low the searches in Google are on Bitcoin. And one thing I think they're missing in that data is how many people are now searching for that in AI and not in Google. So are we sure that people aren't looking for it, or are they looking in AI now? Because I don't look at Google for hardly anything anymore. So going to your point about the fact that AI can also be powerful in terms of its ability to accelerate your learning and knowledge. I have a feeling a lot of people are already learning about Bitcoin through AI, and we don't have a good way of measuring that. So who knows for sure? But when you go to like the debt of Japan, they're at what, 160% of GDP. The US, no, they're at 260% of GDP. You might have seen recently the Japanese economic minister said that their economic condition is worse than Greece's was when they went through their crisis. And the data proves he's right, because the Greece's debt to GDP was something like 130%. when they had their crisis and the European Union had to save them, whereas Japan somewhere 250, 260%. And the US is above Greece's level from that time. And it's only getting worse, not better. The whole Doge, everyone's so excited about Doge was going to knock out $1 trillion or $2 trillion of government spending every year. And they knocked out like 150 billion, which is literally peanuts in the scope of things. So, it's, as Lynn Alden says, nothing stops this train. And I think that includes AI. AI's productivity driven deflation is not going to be enough to stop the train. They're going to have to keep printing, as Larry Lepard says. And in the end, fiat is going to see its demise. And I think sooner rather than a lot of people expect.
There's something super interesting on Google Trends that I want to show you, because you are right with the Google searches. I hardly search anything on Google these days. But there's something other than that also there. There's a web search, which when we look back, the biggest uptick was 2000. Oh, wait, that's past 5 years.
It was 2017, I think, was the biggest.
Let's go even further back. Yeah, 2017 it was the big upswing. So in here we are down at 7% of that. But if you now switch to YouTube search, it's still down, but it's a lot more up. So I think YouTube, because YouTube grows and like people still type things into YouTube and use YouTube a lot more. So AI is not interfering with YouTube. Maybe still people like first go to AI, but I think YouTube is a little less affected by that than Google. And then we actually see a little bit more of an interesting comparison where we are like 25% of 2017. And this feels more accurate also to me when I look in my small subjective world outside of Bitcoin here in my real life in Austria, because 2017 was the first time I heard about Bitcoin and it was everywhere. And you couldn't go anywhere without hearing about Bitcoin. Now Bitcoin reaches 100K and nobody cares. Like people are asleep for some reason. But more and more people are aware of it. And so like it's, this seems to be a little bit more accurate than the 7%. And yeah, 24%, that's like 4 times as much as on Google searches.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I agree with you. It's not penetrating the mainstream like you would think, not just for price action. Like what surprises me is like, the whole strategy stuff and the SBR, the strategic Bitcoin reserves. And, there's so much news. It's not just NGU number go up stuff. The pace of news around Bitcoin is insane right now for those that are paying attention, but apparently a lot of people are not in our circles and not seeing a lot of that news. It's not resonating with them when it comes out. Currently I'm a professor in a business school, and my colleagues don't know anything about Bitcoin, like nothing. And they're professors in a business school. They literally don't know anything. One of my colleagues, I was talking about Bitcoin. This was a few months ago. And he didn't know anything about it. He'd heard about it, but he didn't know anything about it. And I started trying to, go back to first principles and explain. And I start with something around, well, here's why Bitcoin is better than fiat. And his very first question, what is fiat? Business school professor. He's been a professor for 30 years, has published probably 50, 80 peer-reviewed academic articles, not on economics. People don't always appreciate the difference between a business professor and an economics professor. Business school professors don't tend to be super deep in economics and Keynesian versus Austrian and all the rest. But finance and business, of course, is their thing, management. So, if business school faculty don't know anything about Bitcoin, then how can we presume the average person on the street does? And, I guarantee you go on any street, except if you're in a Bitcoin circular economy or happen to be like in Las Vegas during a conference about Bitcoin, you're going to find very few people have any clue about Bitcoin. The other day I was somewhere. Oh yeah. When I was in Orlando and I was about to leave from the Bitcoin for Corporations conference, and I went to buy some gifts for my family to bring home. And I went to have lunch. And the woman asked me, "Oh, what are you in town for holiday?" I'm like, "No, I'm here for a conference going home later today." She's like, "Well, what was it about?" I said, "Bitcoin." And she said, "Oh, I don't know anything about that." And she walked away. She didn't even know what to say.
Yeah, it's. I had the similar experience in Amsterdam. I said to the guy that I'm here for. I bought a falafel, like
Yeah.
the Durham thing in Amsterdam, and I told him I'm here for a conference, and he's like, "Oh, the thing that just got bought by BlackRock." Like he thought BlackRock now owns
Owns Bitcoin.
all the Bitcoin network. That was really.
Surprising he knew the word BlackRock and even knew that. Like that's at least he was getting close to something real.
Yeah, it's when you said that with Fiat, I had that meme in mind. You probably have seen that. This like Fiat of the Fiat car, the meme of like, why do those cryptocurrency people hate us so much? Leave us alone.
I haven't seen that, but that's funny.
You haven't seen that. That's such a classic. It's a really good one. It's such a classic that I never actually saw the real tweet. I don't even know if they actually tweeted that, but I assume they actually did tweet that. But it's like probably every year a few times in my feed, so I see it every now and then.
That's a good one. I like it. I might have to use that sometime.
Yeah, so like this, but I agree. It's the best cycle for news and the worst cycle for price action. It feels like everything is bullish, like we're going to the moon. There's no real bad things coming out. Like when Elon Musk in 2021 said Bitcoin is bad for the environment, like there's no such bad things happening in this cycle. All the bad things that are happening are so small and nobody cares about them. But apparently, maybe we need more hate that we can get more love.
Maybe. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question. Like, what would it take for Bitcoin to reach public consciousness at scale without it necessarily being, FTX crap or something like that? And I think it would probably be a country like US buying Bitcoin for their SBR would make ripple effects in Bitcoin big time, but would not reach mainstream, even though it's massive, it wouldn't. But what would be a country people are familiar with accepting it as legal tender. Something like that. Like a country, a lot of people, like I'm thinking of, I used to live in Spain. So I'm thinking of Spain, like Spain, which like so many people go to visit. And like, if they just announce, they're very far behind. They're very bureaucratic and very far behind. But like, imagine they announce they're only going to start, they're leaving the European Union, monetary union, and they're going to only take Bitcoin now. I mean, that would be ripple effects because it would affect everything in the economy. It would affect, geopolitical and 100 million. I don't know how many people visit Spain every year as a tourist, and they'd have to figure out how to get Bitcoin to be there and everything. There would have to be something like that for it to be like a single thing to bring it to collective consciousness. But I think what we're going to see is just going to be more of a, the gradual then suddenly thing, but it'll be more like when economies start falling, fiat start, Japan. Japan could be the first fiat like top 10 to go under. And what do they do in response? The ripple effect will be massive. They may not embrace Bitcoin, but it will end up resulting in Bitcoin being top of mind around the world as a fix to the problems of fiat that as of today, it's like when Argentina or Venezuela or Zimbabwe goes through hyperinflation, the part of the world that is, lives in dominant economies where their currency is relatively stable, it barely registers for those people. They don't really understand the pain. But when it happens to an economy that they're familiar with, that's supposed to be indestructible, I think it might require something like that.
What if Austria adopts an Austrian economics Bitcoin standard?
They should.
They definitely should, but Austria might be too small.
No, I was going to say it wouldn't do it. It wouldn't do it because probably, I don't know, if you ask, this might offend you, but I'm not trying to offend you. If you ask 10 people on the street in Mexico, where I am right now, or in Singapore, they're more formally educated, or in, I don't know, name a country far from Europe, El Salvador, or I don't know, name another one, maybe further in Northeast Asia or someplace, and say, find Austria on a map. Some of them are going to actually point to Australia if they know where Australia is on the map, because they don't differentiate Austria and Australia. I've had that experience with people. And then others will say it's somewhere in Europe and they would have no idea how to identify it on a map. So no, I don't think Austria would be enough, even though it would be awesome if Austria did do it. It would make a lot of sense.
I'm trying to travel as much as possible, and I had this meme in real life happening to me since I don't know, like for 5-10 times or something like that, where I have a conversation with someone and they say, oh, like, where are you from? And I'm like, yeah, Austria. And they're like, oh, I love kangaroos. Austria, not Australia. So like, I get that because outside of Europe, I mean, in Europe, I guess most people are aware of Austria, but outside of Europe, like most people are like, oh, like Austria, like what is this? Like where is this? Maybe like they know Arnold Schwarzenegger. They know Adolf Hitler. They might know like Mozart and some little bit of culture things.
From Austria. I don't think people all know that those are from Austria originally, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, is they from Germany? Like maybe, like, and I even get it sometimes where people are like, "Hey, you're the YouTuber from Germany, right?" Like no, I'm not. It's different.
Yeah,
but it definitely is too small of a country. We have the mountains, we have the lakes, but we don't have kangaroos.
Austria is beautiful, though. The first time I ever tried snowboarding was in Kitzbühel in like 1995, I think.
Man, that was before I even came on Earth.
Yeah, but you got Bitcoin before I did, so you got to give yourself credit for that.
I'm in Bitcoin since I'm 21 years old, so I'm pretty proud of that fact.
For sure, yeah.
21 with Bitcoin. I have one question to ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
So as I mentioned before, most of my work has been around the intersection of sort of technology and sustainability, and I think in the Bitcoin community, I think there's sort of a love-hate relationship with sustainability, the hate that Bitcoin has gotten around energy consumption of mining and everything. I think I could help Bitcoiners appreciate the values from the sustainability community and reach a much larger audience. But going beyond the topic of Bitcoin, just better understanding the sustainability challenges the world is facing and how we can innovate in a profitable way to solve those problems. So like in Bitcoin, one of the things that is very anti-sustainability is the whole DEI, and it feels like interventionist and all the rest of it. And my focus has always been on the profitable approaches to tackling sustainability challenges. So that would probably be my answer.
Interesting. I love that. Then I guess you also are forced into those mining conversations and energy mining conversations a lot.
Sure. I had one of the reasons I didn't adopt Bitcoin right away, as far as something I was really intrigued by, was I believed in all the FUD around the energy consumption and the CO2 emissions, and it was like felt inconsistent of my interest in merging tech and sustainability together, that I would embrace a tech that's bad for the environment. And that was actually one of the barriers for me. And one of the reasons I came around to Bitcoin was I studied it more and realized that Bitcoin mining was actually contributing to accelerating renewable energy adoption and helping bring more inclusive energy to more people. And I have a whole chapter in my book on that to address that topic.
I love it. Really cool. Yeah, it's actually a less and less. Maybe it's been a year since the last time I heard the energy fat from someone. Actually, like it's gone away almost since BlackRock came in the scene. Weirdly enough,
declining. Yeah, it's declining. And I don't know if have you interviewed Daniel Batten?
I have him actually this week, so I will talk with him. I think tomorrow or day after tomorrow.
So he's, one of the global resident experts in Bitcoin around the sustainability of Bitcoin mining. And he influenced a lot of my thinking on it. And I cite him probably 4 or 5 times in the chapter I have on Bitcoin mining and energy. And he's been sharing the peer-reviewed academic research about Bitcoin and energy, and has demonstrated that over the last few years, the FUD is disappearing even from the academic community as they start to get under the hood and realize from real data that no, it actually is helping accelerate renewable energy adoption. So yeah, you're right.
Really cool. We have a routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the question from the previous guest is an interesting one. What is the biggest value you personally got from Bitcoin?
I think, well, I've always had a patient side of me, the low time preference. I know, like, recently you've said this in some of your recent pods quite a bit about how people that get all worked up about daily fluctuations in Bitcoin price should touch grass more and all the rest. And I think I've gotten more that way because of Bitcoin. Even though I've always had a patient side to me, I also can be impatient about things. And, I'm at a different stage in my career than you are. I'm 54. I didn't want to work forever. I didn't get FIRE when I didn't even know FIRE didn't exist as a thing when I was your age. So it never occurred to me that there was a way to not work until you're 65 or 70. I just thought that's what you did. And so my point being, I could be impatient about retirement and everything. And getting into Bitcoin has helped me appreciate having patience even at my age. I'm not that old. I still hopefully have many decades ahead of me. And, I'm more patient about a lot of things, and I try to share that low time preference with people who are feeling impatient.
You might live forever. Maybe life has no end.
Have you heard the longevity escape velocity that some of the deep experts in longevity research combining with AI think that it's a possibility, and by 2030, if you're still alive, you could technically live forever, not exactly forever, but basically you gain 1 year of life for every year you've lived because of the benefits of technology, AI, biogenetics, all converging. So yeah, you could be right.
Super interesting. It's super interesting. I just want to share that with you. I don't know. Have you heard about Brian Johnson?
Yes.
He is at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas. I've seen it. Wait, I'll probably find it directly. Yeah, here. This guy, Brian Johnson. I literally saw his documentary on Netflix, and a few days later, I scrolled through the speaker list because I wanted to see someone, and I see him. I'm like, really? He's a Bitcoiner? Like, what does he do? So it's really interesting, the combination of longevity and Bitcoin. It combines like having more wealth, but also having more time. And Bitcoin is all aware that time is the only thing more valuable than the actual Bitcoin.
And what if, as you say, what if maybe that's not true anymore? If longevity is, if we do reach escape velocity, maybe Bitcoin is the most scarce asset on earth. We'll see. You know what I think? I know we're wrapping up, but my take on this, because I'm very into all the exponential technologies. I've studied them quite a bit. I teach about them and how they converge increasingly, and that's what's really fascinating. Bitcoin and AI convergence, for example. I think we are getting very close to some. I wouldn't call it longevity escape velocity the way it's defined. That we're by 2030 we might actually live indefinitely. But when you look at all the technologies converging, what I feel like, we're going to be able to extend the quality of life for everyone on Earth over time, which means the quality of the end of your life. So if you're going to live to be 85 and you still only live to be 85, but you would have started in the 70s with cancer or some other debilitating disease and have to survive 15 years on that before you die, you might live a healthy, full life more towards the end and more productive, including your ability to contribute or create or whatever, and AI will help us do that. Similarly, things like organs, we're starting to learn how to cultivate organs with, actually at my university, they have patents around using pigs for certain types of organ cultivation. I mean, some crazy stuff happening. So we can fix organs, we can fix skin, we can fix all kinds of things. And increasingly with exponential technology, we'll be able to do that more and more. So I think we're going to see first is extending the quality of life for people, and we're going to gradually see a growing projected lifespan of people as well. And probably in your lifetime, you will see average people living in their hundreds. That would not surprise me, like 105, 108.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, there's so much interesting things going on. It's like AI, longevity, Bitcoin, and it's unbelievable. What a time to be alive! Thank you so much. What a time to be alive! Thank you so much, Boyd, for being such a great speaker and guest on my podcast today. And before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm accessible on X at Boyd Cohen. So first name, last name. I also have a website, bitcoinsingularity.ai, which talks a bit more about me and my book as well.
Really cool. Thank you so much, Boyd, for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.